Have you ever looked at a really exceptional organization, could be a company, maybe a nonprofit, even, I don't know, a sports team, and just wondered what makes them tick? What's their secret sauce? What truly sets them apart from the ones that are just, well, good. It's not always about the money, right? It's something deeper, their impact, how they just seem to work. So today, we're doing a deep dive into some really groundbreaking research that tries to crack that exact code. Our sources for this are insights pulled from a pretty landmark study, Good to Great, Why Some Companies Make the Leap and Others Don't. And this isn't just another business book, believe me. It's the result of 5 years, something like 15,000 hours of intense research looking into what separates the truly great companies. Our mission today, to kind of pull out the most potent and often really surprising insights from all that work, give you a bit of a shortcut to understanding what drives that kind of big transformation.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating, I think, is that it's not about finding some, magic bullet or the latest management fad. The research really aimed to figure out what systematically separates the great organizations from the merely good ones. And they did it almost like a scientific experiment. They even studied what didn't work for the companies they compared them against, kind of like Sherlock Holmes, focusing on the dog that didn't bark. We're talking about companies here that achieve stock returns beating the general market by like an average of 7 times over 15 years.
Oh,
That's outperforming giants like Coca-Cola, Intel. Huge. So what does all this mean for you, whether you're, building a company, leading a team, maybe just thinking about your own life? Let's try and unpack it.
Okay, yeah, let's dive right in. Because the really interesting part, and honestly pretty counterintuitive, is what the research didn't find. We all have these assumptions about what makes a company great, right? So what widely held beliefs, the common wisdom, just weren't backed up by the data here.
That's where it gets really interesting. Yeah, a lot of that conventional wisdom just fell apart under scrutiny. For instance, they found no systematic link between specific types of executive compensation and making that leap from good to great. In fact, get this, the good to great executives actually got paid slightly less in total cash comp 10 years after the transition compared to the CEOs at the companies that stayed mediocre.
Wow, really? Less. That's completely backwards from what you usually hear about, pay for performance and aligning incentives. So are they saying compensation just doesn't matter at all? Or is it more like it's just not the main thing that triggers the big change?
Yeah, exactly the latter. It's not irrelevant, of course, but it clearly wasn't the primary driver of making that leap. Another big one they debunked. Strategy alone didn't separate them. Both the great companies and the comparison ones, they all had strategies, often pretty well-defined ones. And there wasn't any evidence the great ones spent more time on long-range strategic planning. What was revealing, though, is that the great companies seemed just as focused on what not to do, and maybe even more importantly, what to stop doing.
What to stop doing? That's a great twist. We always hear about starting new things, right? Not stopping the old ones.
Yeah.
What else got shut down?
Well, technology,
Mm.
often seen as the big disruptor, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the research found it was rarely the igniter of a transformation. It could definitely accelerate things once they got going, sure, but couldn't cause the shift on its own. And another classic myth, mergers and acquisitions, M&A, played virtually no role in igniting the transformation from good to great. The source actually has a great line on this, something like, "Two big mediocrities joined together never make one great company."
Ouch. Yeah, I can see that. But it rings true, doesn't it? Any other big anti-findings that jumped out?
Yeah, a couple more. They found these companies didn't really focus first on things like managing change or motivating people or creating alignment, the usual change management stuff.
Mm.
The researchers felt that under the right conditions, those problems they sort of melted away.
Melted away. Interesting.
Yeah. And maybe the most surprising, there's no big name for it, no tagline, no launch event, no specific program to announce their transformations. Some leaders apparently weren't even fully aware of how big the transformation was while it was happening. It only really became clear looking back. So this revolutionary leap in results, definitely, but not some revolutionary process they rolled out with a big bang.
Wow. Okay, so if it's not about all those common levers, the pay, the strategy sessions, the tech, the M&A, the change programs, it really does flip things on their head. So what is it about then? Where does the journey from good to great actually begin? It seems like it starts somewhere really fundamental.
It absolutely does. It starts with people, no question. The first really foundational finding is what they termed level 5 leadership. This describes a leader who blends this kind of paradoxical mix of extreme personal humility with intense professional will. These leaders, they're incredibly ambitious, sure, but the ambition is first and foremost for the company, for the institution, not for themselves. They have this almost fanatical drive to produce sustained results, make the company great, whatever it takes.
That really is revolutionary, isn't it? It's not what you typically hear from leadership gurus. This quiet, almost contradictory mix of humility and fierce resolve, not charisma. So it's not about being the loudest person in the room or the most famous. It's something much quieter but stronger.
Exactly. And you contrast that with what they called level 4 leaders, often very effective, charismatic, but more egocentric. They sometimes set up their successors to fail, maybe unintentionally, because it was so much about them. The research mentions people like Al Dunlap, Chainsaw Al at Scott Paper, huge fanfare, massive cuts, big short-term stock bump. But he left the company kind of hollowed out. Or even Lee Iacocca at Chrysler, a genuine hero early on, absolutely. But later, maybe his personal celebrity started to overshadow the company's long-term health a bit. His attention seemed divided. But compare that to the level 5s, like Darwin Smith at Kimberly-Clark, diagnosed with terminal cancer just 2 months into the CEO job, given less than a year, tells the board, keeps working through radiation, lives another 25 years, most of them as CEO. He apparently never stopped trying to become qualified for the job, made huge gutsy calls like selling the paper mills, the company's traditional core. Wall Street thought he was nuts.
Incredible resolve.
Absolutely. Or Coleman Mockler at Gillette. Quiet, unassuming guy. Fought off multiple hostile takeover bids, not by cutting, but by investing massively in crazy new products like the Sensor and Mach 3 razors. Fierce resolve, but personally, very humble. And the key point is, this level 5 finding wasn't just an opinion. It was an empirical result from the data, cutting right against that popular image of the larger-than-life celebrity savior CEO.
That distinction between level 4 and level 5 is just, it's huge. It really hammers home how critical the people are at the top. And that actually leads perfectly into the next big insight, doesn't it? The idea of first who, then what. It sounds so simple on the surface, but the implications are massive, right?
Oh, totally. Simple to say, incredibly hard to do consistently. It means you get the right people on the bus, and just as importantly, the wrong people off the bus before you figure out where you're going to drive it.
Before, not after you set the direction.
Before. Look at Wells Fargo, under leaders like Dick Cooley and Carl Reichardt. They were relentless about getting top talent. They built an executive team where almost everyone eventually became a CEO somewhere else. That was their focus. Or David Maxwell at Fannie Mae. The company was literally losing $1 million a day. Huge crisis. His first priority. Not some grand new strategy. It was getting the right management team in place. Took up a huge amount of his time initially. Compare that with, say, Jack Eckert of Eckert Drugs. Brilliant at the what, knowing where to put stores, what to acquire, but he didn't build a strong who team around him. When he left, the company stumbled. Or that genius with 1,000 helpers model you sometimes see. Works great while the genius is there, like at Teledyne for a long time. But it often falls apart when the genius leaves. The research is pretty clear. It's not primarily how you compensate your executives, it's which executives you have in the first place. The right people, they argue, will do the right things and deliver the best results regardless of the incentive system. Think about Nucor, the steel company. They built their culture hiring, quote, farmers with a work ethic from rural areas, people who fit their specific culture, and they were rigorous about removing those who didn't fit. Turnover could be like 50% in the first year of a new plant.
So it's about being rigorous in those people decisions, but not necessarily ruthless in a sort of cruel way.
Exactly. Rigorous, not ruthless. They use the example of Wells Fargo acquiring Crocker Bank. They didn't let people just hang around in limbo wondering if they had a job. They made swift, upfront decisions. If someone wasn't going to fit the Wells performance culture, they told them quickly so they could move on. It wasn't pleasant, for sure, but it was seen as more honest and fair than prolonging the uncertainty. And one more piece of this first who idea. Put your best people on your best opportunities, not necessarily your biggest problems.
Ah, that's counterintuitive too. Usually you throw your stars at the fires.
Right. But Philip Morris, for example, moved their top guy, George Weissman, to run their tiny international division. Seemed like a demotion, but that division then exploded, making Marlboro the world's best-selling cigarette before it was even #1 in the U.S. Same with Kimberly-Clark selling the mills. They moved their best paper industry managers into the consumer business. Even though they had no consumer products experience, they bet on the people.
You know, what's really striking is how this first who thing can even spill over into having a great personal life. You mentioned Coleman Mockler at Gillette, facing all that pressure, hostile takeovers, yet he rarely worked evenings or weekends because he trusted his team.
That's what the research suggests, yeah. He built such a strong who around him that it allowed him balance, allowed him joy. He could lead this intense corporate battle, but still spend his time with people she liked and respected, doing work they all believed in.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful.
It absolutely is. Having the right people, trusting them, it frees you up. Okay, so step one, get the right people on the bus. That's the foundation. What's the next crucial phase? The research points to a couple of really key disciplines of thought, starting with the ability to face the cold, hard truth.
Exactly. This leads to what they call the Stockdale paradox. It's about confronting the brutal facts, yet never losing faith. It sounds like a contradiction, but it's this duality. You absolutely must maintain unwavering faith that you can and will prevail in the end, no matter how difficult things get. Unshakable faith. And at the exact same time, you have to have the discipline to confront the most brutal, ugly facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. No sugarcoating.
Named after Admiral Jim Stockdale, the POW in Vietnam.
Right, that's right. He saw that the optimists, the ones who thought they'd be out by Christmas, were often the ones who didn't make it. You needed both the faith and the realism. And this duality, this paradox, was present in all the good to great companies. Think Winston Churchill during World War II. Bold vision, absolute faith in victory, but also relentlessly focused on the grim realities of the war effort day to day. And to make this happen, these companies created a climate where the truth, even unwelcome truth, could actually be heard. They found four kind of common practices. First, they tended to lead with questions, not answers. Alan Wurtzel at Circuit City, when they were near bankruptcy, didn't come in with pronouncements. He started by asking questions. Why? 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 He apparently asked his board members more questions than they asked him.
Okay, leading with questions. What else?
Second, engage in dialogue and debate, not coercion. Get people arguing, hashing things out. Ken Iverson in Nucor apparently encouraged outright chaos in his general manager meetings. People yelling, pounding tables, but they'd walk out with clear conclusions everyone understood. Heated debate, not forced consensus. Third, conduct autopsies without blame. When things go wrong, dissect them to learn, not to point fingers. Joe Coleman at Philip Morris openly analyzed their failed 7-Up acquisition. Wrote about it, talked about it clinically. What did we learn?
Learning from failure, not hiding it. Makes sense.
And the fourth, build red flag mechanisms. These are ways to turn information into information that simply cannot be ignored. Jim Collins, the author, used a literal red flag in his university class. A student could raise it any time to stop the lecture and voice an observation or disagreement. Guaranteed feedback couldn't be brushed aside.
A literal red flag. Okay.
Or a company called Granite Rock had something called short pay. Customers who weren't satisfied could just unilaterally deduct the amount they felt appropriate from their payment. No phone call needed. That forced immediate attention to any problems. It was an early warning system that couldn't be ignored.
Wow. These mechanisms really force you to confront reality. Okay, so that commitment to the brutal facts, that clears the way for the second key discipline of thought, finding your hedgehog concept.
It sounds kind of simple, maybe a bit folksy, but it seems like it's actually quite deep and complex, right?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just a slogan or a mission statement you knock out in an afternoon. It's this simple, crystalline concept that emerges from deep understanding at the intersection of three circles. Think of a Venn diagram. The first circle is understanding what you can be the best in the world at, and equally important, what you cannot be the best at. This isn't just about core competence, which you're currently good at. It's about what you have the potential to truly dominate. Abbott Labs, for instance. They realized they probably couldn't beat Merck or Pfizer at discovering blockbuster drugs. Too far behind in R&D. But they could be the best in the world at creating products that contribute to cost-effective healthcare. Things like hospital nutritionals, diagnostic devices. So they focused there and eventually became number one.
Okay, best in the world. What's the second circle?
The second circle is understanding what drives your economic engine. What's the key metric, the single denominator like profit per X or cash flow per X for nonprofits that has the greatest impact on your economics? For Walgreens, they figured out it was profit per customer visit. That insight led them to focus on convenience, clustering stores close together, making it easy for customers to pop in. More visits, more profit.
Ah, okay. So it simplifies the economic model.
Exactly. For Fannie Mae, it was profit per mortgage risk level. They realized they could become the best in the world at assessing mortgage risk. For Nucor, the steel company, it was profit per ton of finished steel, tied directly to their unique culture and technology.
Got it. Best in the world, economic engine. And the third circle.
The third circle is understanding what you're deeply passionate about, what really motivates the people inside the company. And this isn't about trying to stimulate passion artificially. It's about discovering what people genuinely care about. The Fannie Mae executives, for example, weren't necessarily passionate about the technicalities of mortgage-backed securities, but they were deeply passionate about the idea of democratizing homeownership, making it possible for more people to own a home. That core purpose drove them.
So it's the intersection of those three: what you can be best at, how you make money sustainably, and what you truly care about. And you're saying this isn't something you just brainstorm over a weekend.
Definitely not. It's an iterative process. Takes time. Lots of dialogue, debate, informed by those brutal facts we talked about. It might take years to really crystallize. The research mentions Hasbro, the toy company, as a comparison. They actually had a hedgehog concept for a while, focusing on classic, enduring toys for sustainable cash flow, and they had an upswing. But then they lost discipline, started chasing fads again, and fell back. It kind of proves the power of the concept, but also how vital it is to stick to it.
Okay, so we've got disciplined people, level 5 leaders, first who, then what? We've got disciplined thought, confront the brutal facts, find the hedgehog concept, what comes next? Logically, it has to be disciplined action, right?
Exactly. And that translates into building a specific kind of culture of discipline. And again, there's a duality here. It requires people who adhere to a consistent system, who follow the hedgehog concept rigorously, but it also gives people freedom and responsibility within that framework. It's not about bureaucracy and rules for rules' sake. Think about an airline pilot. They operate within an incredibly strict system, checklists, procedures, regulations. But they also have immense freedom and responsibility for critical decisions, like whether to take off in bad weather or how to handle an emergency. It's disciplined freedom.
Disciplined freedom, I like that.
Circuit City was an example. They built this highly consistent system for their stores, which allowed managers significant freedom within those boundaries. That's how they could, as they put it, stamp these stores out all over the country with great consistency.
Hmm.
And this kind of culture, it tends to attract and keep self-disciplined people who don't need to be managed, people who are intrinsically motivated. The study uses this great phrase, the rinsing your cottage cheese factor. Inspired by Dave Scott, the 6-time Ironman triathlon champion, he would literally rinse his cottage cheese to get rid of any extra fat, believing those tiny disciplined acts gave him an edge.
Wow, that's dedication.
It is. It's about having people who will go to those lengths naturally.
No.
Carl Reichert at Wells Fargo embodied this, freezing executive salaries, closing the fancy executive dining room, even getting rid of free coffee for executives. These weren't huge cost savings, but they sent a powerful signal about discipline starting at the top. Very different from, say, Bank of America building lavish new headquarters with private executive elevators at the same time.
Yeah, leading by example, not just words. And a really crucial part of this discipline culture, you mentioned it briefly before, is this idea of a stop doing list. That sounds quite rare.
It is rare, but powerful. It means rigorously adhering to your hedgehog concept and, just as importantly, having the discipline to stop doing anything that doesn't fit. Darwin Smith at Kimberly-Clark, for example, stopped giving annual earnings forecasts to Wall Street. He felt it focused people too much on the short term, distracting from long-term building. He also got rid of most job titles to fight bureaucracy. Budgeting in these companies wasn't just about allocating funds. It was a discipline for deciding which activities were crucial to the hedgehog concept and deserved funding, and which should be stopped entirely. This culture often fostered a kind of egalitarianism, too. Nucor, again, they listed all 7,000 employees alphabetically in their annual report. Everyone wore the same color hard hat. And in tough times, the executives took bigger pay cuts proportionally than the frontline workers. Built a real sense of, we're all in this together.
Okay, that paints a clear picture of the culture. Now let's talk about how all these pieces, the people, the thought, the action, how they come together to create that incredible momentum. This is the flywheel idea, right? One of the most famous concepts from the book.
Yes, the flywheel and the doom loop. This is really where it all connects. The flywheel concept explained that these good-to-great transformations, they never happened in one fell swoop. There was no single defining action, no miracle moment, no grand program that suddenly changed everything. Instead, it was this cumulative process, like pushing a giant heavy flywheel. It takes huge effort to get it moving even one rotation, then 2, then 10. But with consistent discipline pushing in the same direction, step by step, decision by decision, it builds momentum, turn by turn. Eventually, it hits a point of breakthrough where the momentum itself starts working for you.
So the overnight success was actually years in the making.
It's exactly. Circuit City's breakthrough took over a decade of pushing that flywheel, refining their superstore concept piece by piece. Nucor toiled in relative obscurity for 10 years before they really broke through. People inside the companies often didn't even perceive it as a dramatic transformation at the time. It just felt like work, consistent effort. The magnitude only became clear later, looking back at the results. And they followed this build-up to breakthrough model even under extreme pressure, like Nucor facing potential bankruptcy or Gillette fighting off those takeovers. They kept pushing the flywheel. Some companies, like Abbott Labs, even developed clever ways to manage short-term Wall Street expectations while still pushing the flywheel. Their blue plans involve publicly setting achievable targets while internally aiming much higher than reinvesting the excess performance back into future growth initiatives. And those big, hairy, audacious goals, BHAGs, they weren't just pulled out of thin air. They flowed from understanding the Hedgehog Concept and building flywheel momentum. Nucor's goal to become the #1 most profitable steel company wasn't some initial bravado. It emerged after years of building momentum, proved it was possible.
So it's about that relentless consistency, the opposite of chasing shiny objects, which leads to the other side of the coin, the doom loop.
Right. The doom loop is what the comparison companies often fell into. Instead of patient, consistent pushing, they'd launch flashy new programs with great fanfare, hoping for a quick, dramatic breakthrough. They'd push the flywheel hard in one direction for a bit, then stop, get discouraged, change direction, launch a new initiative, lurch sideways, throw the flywheel in another direction entirely. Warner Lambert was a classic example. Went through like 3 major restructurings in 20 years. Each time, a new leader, a new program, trying to jolt the company onto a new path. But they never built sustained momentum. This often involved those misguided acquisitions we talked about, bolting on unrelated businesses, hoping for synergy that never materialized, or new leaders coming in and simply undoing the work of the previous one, stopping any momentum that might have been building.
So the key difference is that coherence, that consistency, where every single piece reinforces the others, pushing in the same direction over a long period.
Precisely. The flywheel captures how all the pieces, level 5 leadership, first who, brutal facts, hedgehog concept, culture of discipline, link together and reinforce each other, creating this powerful cumulative effect. The whole becomes much, much greater than the sum of the parts.
Okay, this deep dive has given us a really clear framework for how organizations make that incredible leap from good to great. But what about staying great, enduring greatness, like for decades or generations? Is there another layer to it?
There is. And this is where the research connects back to the author's previous work in the book, Built to Last. It adds this kind of extra dimension. That dimension involves core ideology and the principle of preserve the core, stimulate progress. Enduring great companies, the ones that lasted for generations like Hewlett-Packard, they had more than just a hedgehog concept.
Yeah.
They had a guiding philosophy, a core ideology. This consists of 2 parts. Core values, the essential, timeless tenets of the organization, and a core purpose, the fundamental reason for being, beyond just making money.
So, like the HP way.
Exactly like the HP way. And interestingly, Hewlett and Packard themselves were classic level 5 leaders. They were focused first on building a particular kind of company, with like-minded people sharing certain values, rather than just figuring out what products to make initially. The research found there are no specific right core values. What mattered was having core values, knowing what they were, building them into the fabric of the organization, and preserving them over long periods. Authenticity was key.
Okay, so you have this fixed core ideology, but the world changes constantly. How do they handle that?
That's the other half of the equation. Preserve the core. Stimulate progress. You hold your core ideology, your values and purpose relatively fixed. That's the anchor. But everything else, strategies, operating practices, cultural norms, structures, even specific goals, is open to change and adaptation. You stimulate relentless progress and change in everything except the core. Think of Walt Disney. The core ideology might involve a passion for creative imagination and a purpose to bring happiness to millions. That stayed constant. But how they did that changed dramatically over time, from short cartoons to feature films to theme parks to resorts to cruise lines. Preserve the core, stimulate progress.
That makes a lot of sense. Preserve the why, change the what and how. Okay, so stepping back from all this, if it's not just about getting bigger, and it's clearly not easy, it requires immense discipline over long periods, why should anyone bother striving for greatness? What's really in it for you, the listener, maybe in your own work or even personal life?
Well, here's one of the most, I think, profound and maybe encouraging findings. The research suggests that building greatness is actually no more difficult, no more painful or exhausting than just perpetuating mediocrity.
Really? How can that be? It sounds like so much hard work.
It is hard work, but think about the energy drain of dealing with the wrong people, or constantly fighting fires because you haven't confronted the brutal facts, or lurching from one failed initiative to another in the doom loop. That's exhausting. The flywheel, once it starts building momentum, actually creates energy. Success builds on success. People get energized by being part of something that's working, something that's excellent. They use this analogy of a high school cross-country team that went from mediocre to great. The coach didn't make them work harder necessarily, but they got laser focused on a simple hedgehog concept: we run best at the end of the race.
Mhm.
They eliminated distracting activities. They built a first-two team of runners committed to that idea. And the success started feeding on itself, attracting more dedicated runners, creating this infectious flywheel effect that led to championships.
So mediocrity drains energy, while the pursuit of greatness, done right, actually generates it.
That seems to be the implication. And ultimately, the why bother with greatness question leads somewhere deeper, more personal. It connects to the search for meaning. If you're engaged in work that you genuinely love and care about, work that resonates with your own passions and values, then the drive to make it great, to make it the best it can possibly be, is almost automatic. It's intrinsically motivating. The coach of that cross-country team, she had an MBA from a top school. Could have done anything. But she found traditional careers lacked meaning for her. She felt compelled to make her running program great, simply because, as she put it, I really care about what we're doing. So, if you find yourself having to ask, why should we try to make this great? Isn't just being successful enough? Well, the research gently suggests you might be in the wrong line of work for you. Which maybe flips the question back to the listener. What work, what endeavor makes you feel compelled to try and create greatness?
That's a powerful thought to end on. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, it really feels like the journey from good to great isn't about some secret formula or flashy shortcuts. It's more about this quiet, disciplined, almost relentless process. Get the right people on the bus, first and foremost. Have the courage to confront the brutal facts of your reality, no matter how unpleasant. Find that clarifying simplicity of your hedgehog concept, what you can be best at, what drives your engine, and what you're passionate about. Build a culture of discipline that enables freedom and responsibility. And then just consistently, relentlessly push that flywheel turn after turn after turn.
Yeah, and if you connect that to the bigger picture from built to last, it really suggests that whether we're talking about a huge company, a small team, or even your own personal goals, the path to lasting greatness is fundamentally about aligning your deepest values and passions with something you can truly excel at, and doing it with self-disciplined people you respect. It's a rigorous process, no doubt.
Hmm.
But as the research indicates, it's a path that leads not just to extraordinary results, but potentially to a more meaningful and energizing existence too.
So, what stands out most to you from this deep dive? Maybe the real question isn't whether you can apply these ideas to go from good to great in whatever you're doing. Maybe it's whether you care enough about something to choose to try. Because if you do find that thing you care about that much, this research suggests you're already well on your way to building something truly excellent.